All right. Can somebody get the lights? Thank you. Probably both. Doesn't really get much better, does it? In fact, I think my screen is brighter than the entire projector screen. That's getting brighter. It's trying. Anyway. Yes, and I do have the microphone on. I think it's even going to show where I'm clicking in the recording. It's going to be 100 times better than our last recording. That much I do know. However, before we get started, guys, so today's tutorial is a little bit more advanced. Obviously, we should have a bit of information, right? You've already done exercise 5. Some of you did it extremely well, and clearly shows that you spent some time with the program, and really appreciate that because it definitely shows. I've already gotten compliments of the hallway as well, right? So always a good sign. But at least for today, we're going to talk floor plans. Now, I don't have an exercise sheet because it's fairly simple, and I figured I was recording it today anyway. So we're going to be going over a lot more commands that we can use in Rhino to actually use our drawings. How many of you guys know how to scan? Have you ever scanned at the school? It's not exactly required. I'll maybe go over it maybe at the end of our tutorial. The hardest part is obviously I can't screen record that, so it's just kind of, you know, an audio recording, so maybe we'll leave that to the end. But really for today, I wanted to show you that we can draw anything, right? Our floor plans, if you will, in Rhino. So I'm going to just go ahead and start a new model. As we know, it doesn't really matter, you know, what template we select. Sometimes there are some presets that say like inches or meters or large objects, small objects, and you're like, architecture, small object or large object? Well, obviously it's a large object, but it really doesn't matter because I can always hit units, right? Type in units, and of course, change it from millimeters to, honestly, just stay in the empirical system, inches or feet, right? Very often I'll just choose feet. Because it's a little easier. And of course I would do this before I start drawing anything, that way it doesn't kind of scale it out of proportion. Anyway, so what you guys are tasked with is essentially copying your floor plans, right? So I'm going to actually just pull one off the internet real quick, see what we get. Let's go to Google. We haven't gone to Google in a while. Have I guys told you about the gaslighting that Google does? I've told Debbie because she's been in my intro class, but let's see, floor plan, observation tower. So obviously we're going to be using our floor plans for this, but I wanted to find, you know, just kind of a quick sample. That way I can essentially show you what you'd want to do with your scan drawing, right? So for instance, this actually reminds me of Edith's project. It looks to be like it's some sort of diagrid structure. So why not? Let's go ahead and take it. However, that's pretty complex. Maybe we might want something easier for this tutorial, maybe something that relates a little bit better to everybody. I'm looking for something more like Marcus's, right? Very relatable. Marcus is like, hell yeah. Yeah, something a little bit more regular like this. That one's not bad. Let's take that one. Not sure why my internet browser is very slow. Could be because I'm screen recording. Of course, it comes from Pinterest. And it's even got a measurement on it so we can even verify. So even though I'm recording, guys, feel free to stop me at any time and ask questions. So in this case, I'm just getting this floor plan real quick. It looks to be like the floor plan of maybe this piece right here. Go ahead and minimize that. And essentially what I want to do is take my scan so that I can either reference it quite literally and trace it, or at least put it on the page. That way I don't have to constantly go back between off screen and on screen, off screen and on looking at the screen. So say I wanted to be able to look at my project on the Rhino screen, I can type in picture. If you're in Rhino 5 or 6, it's picture frame. So I'll go to my desktop, I'll get that screenshot that I just took, and I'll select a base point and the rest, right? Pretty fair and simple. Now, you may be thinking, okay, well, what scale did that come in? Well, we'll have to verify it. So for instance, let's say this was our scan. We'd have to know a certain dimension, that way we can sort of reference it. So in my case, I want to draw a line, and I'm going to say, you know, I drew my plans and I knew that they were exactly 4 feet wide from this point to that point. So I'm going to use that as my reference. So in your case, all you have to do is know a certain dimension that you actually drew it as, right? So that's of course important. So I said 4 feet. I'm going to go ahead and type in 4 foot sign or foot symbol, enter. And of course, it's pretty big. My drawing's pretty small. So this line, if you will, is 4 feet. What do you guys think? I gotta make the drawing bigger or smaller? Gotta make it much bigger. However, we don't have to do much work. So each of those points has an endpoint, and I even accidentally selected the other side of that endpoint first. So I really just need this other side to match up to that line. So I'll take the image, scale, type in scale, and there's a bunch of scales, so be cognizant of which scale. I'm going to type in scale, enter. It's going to say base point, so I'm going to choose the point that I already have here, and it's going to say reference point. So I want this side to be 4 feet long, so I'm going to select the other side of that distance. So I'm going to line it up with this guy right here, click, and then I can stretch it to my 4 foot line. So I got to come out a little bit and click to that line. Now I know I make it look very simple, right? Let's try that again, right? Just to take a look. Got my 4 foot line, got my small image. In fact, I'll show you one more thing that's usually very nice to have. If you click on the image and you click on the paint little tube right here, or what's known as the material. So if you click on that material, you can actually change its transparency. Right down here you can toggle its transparency and make it a little bit more transparent. That way it's easier to see that line. For instance, you probably can't even see that line. Oh, kind of see it in the projector. However, it should be much more apparent in the recording. Anyway, can definitely see it a lot better. Let's try that scale again. Scale, enter. We're going to need our base point, other side. I can hold shift, that way I know it's a straight line, and scale it up to that point. Of course, I see the end and the intersection, so I know that it's clicking in. And the way that I could double check is draw another line. So let's draw a line from here to there. I can click on it. I can type in length. And right here at the very bottom it says 1,199 millimeters. Well, that's great, but I need that in inches. So let's type in units again. It is in feet, however, I need to make it fractional, right? So that it actually displays it non-decimal format. But yeah, so now we have our drawing in Rhino to scale, right? And what I often like to tell my students is anytime that we draw something in Rhino, it's not at 1/4 scale, it's not at 1/8 scale, it's at the true scale. So important, because I can always change the scale later. I can always make it smaller, I can make it bigger based on a percentage or even a viewport, which is something to maybe write down and look at a tutorial. What are viewports in Rhino, right? Just in case you are trying to answer the scale question. Anyway, from here, I can do a couple of things. I can either draw literally on top of this, right? So I can go ahead and lock my image, right? I can even make a an image layer. I can start thinking about I want things that are going to be stairs versus handrails. So I can even separate all my layers, of course, into different colors. And I like to do that first. I can do column structures. Let's see, what else do we have? We have the floor. and you know, maybe dash lines or metal pieces. I see that, you know, there's kind of some special pieces going on in here, so maybe I just special pieces. Either way, we do want to be, how many of you guys noticed how easy it was to work in Illustrator if you had all the layers well organized, right? A much simpler task. I mean, I even saw Yahara yesterday, you know, bring it in, 2 minutes later, already has it, right? So of course, very effective workspace. Either way, another thing that I like to do before is of course lock it. But then select each layer, so I can double click and say I want to work on the stairs first. I can go ahead and draw my first line. And as you can see, it's obviously pixelated, so we're gonna have to kind of fake it till we make it. However, we don't necessarily have to completely fake it. So it can be true, so I can type in 4 feet, enter. I can hold shift so I know it's perfect, and click, right? However, I don't need to copy this over and over again. I could, right? I do have these 2 lines already here. And let's go ahead and change their line type to red, so you can see them a little bit better. Sorry, it's pretty hard to see on the projector. However, we can offset that because I do want it to be a foot. So offset. I can even select my distance, so I can type in D, enter. It's gonna default to distance. So I want it to be exactly that much, that way it's always congruent. And I got all my stairs. Click on each line, enter, and voila, right? Now I can take those lines, I can mirror them and get them on the other side, right? So mirror. I could either guess the midpoint, right, and just sort of fake it till I make it, or I can get the true one. So I'm going to use a line again. I need a point to point. So I'm going to guess about right there to about right there. Take these lines and of course mirror them, right, using that midpoint. Comes up, hold shift, and voila, right? It's a little off, right? So maybe we do have to hold shift, add to our selections, and move it down a little bit. After all, this is us sort of following the drawing, right? So I'm going to unlock, and I forgot to put this image on a layer, so let's go ahead and put it on my default layer. Bless you. That way I can even turn off my image, that way I can actually see what I'm drawing. Oh, clearly I needed to so I can get rid of some things. But I want to complete my stairs, so I can either do it line by line, right? I can draw it quite literally. Let's change that color red to something we can see a little bit better. What comes up well? Green. Dark green usually comes up well. That is so much worse. I guess red is just, well, it actually looks okay on the projector. It looks awful on the screen for some reason. Anyway, not too bad. Let's see, let's continue. All right, so a couple things. So for the most part, I want you to be completely two-dimensional, right, about things. So another way that we can do this is actually by memory or just measuring our drawing, right? So you don't necessarily have to trace anything, which is essentially what we're doing. So in other words, we can actually do it, I think what I prefer is actually sort of what I would call a manual way. So in my case, I know it's a 25 by 25 box, right, by 25. Right? Obviously this is a smaller, actually, look at that. This design fits in that 25 by 25. But we can basically draw it by hand, right? So especially if you know you're drawing pretty well, and you don't necessarily need to scan it, or maybe your drawing is a little inaccurate and you know it, then I would definitely recommend this option for you. Just draw it manually, right? After all, it's going to be perfect anyway. So a couple of the things that we learned was obviously explode. That destroys that rectangle shape that we made and turns it into basically 4 separate lines, right? So explode. So maybe I have an offset 4-foot stairs again. So I can go ahead and do that. I can type in D for distance, enter. I can put 4 feet, enter. And of course get those lines. So I don't know, maybe I have a stair that's going all the way up. Obviously just making up the stair right now. Next thing I could do is of course get those stairs. So I can go ahead and trim them. Awesome. Go ahead and offset this one by 12 inches. And voila. Right. Of course I could do that a bunch of times, or I could do it 3 times and copy it. And then of course get rid of whatever I don't need. So that one. Looks like there's a second line in there. There we go. So yeah, now we got some stairs. Right, or at least 2-dimensionally. We can even dimension it, so DIM. We can put it on a separate layer, of course. And of course we might have to actually change our graphics. But that might be something you actually want to change in there anyway. So dimension style. Where is the style? Anyway, you don't necessarily have to dimension it, but I would look into it just because it's always kind of nice on the drawing. Let's see, what else am I forgetting? We can fillet edges. So let's say I actually wanted this to be sort of a curved edge. So I can fillet. And I can set its radius. So let's say a radius of 12 inches. Then I select the 2 lines, and it makes that curvature for us. Right, kind of nice. And let's do it to all 4 corners, why not? But obviously I think we get the picture. The next thing, you know, I'm struggling a little bit because some of you guys, I know you're ready to probably do 3-dimensional things, but the point of at least Graphics 2 is to do these things, of course, sort of originally. So what would be nice is, of course, to get the rest of the drawings, right? So at least for our assignment, what we'll need is the floor plans, the elevations, and the sections, all drawn in Rhino, right? Hopefully, definitely wrote that down, right? Because again, like I said, there's not going to be an exercise sheet for this one. Essentially just going to go with the flow. Just because everybody's going to actually produce something a little bit different, right? However, it would be nice if it's composed, so on a 24:7. So, like I said, this is actually to a true scale. So what would I have to do to calculate the paper basically necessary to fit all these things? So what I would actually want to do is make a piece of paper that is the scale that I need. So for instance, our object, if you will, is at 1:1 scale. 4 feet line equals 4 feet in real life. So what we need to do is actually make a really big size piece of paper that is to scale. So in my case, if I type in a 24:36, right, 24 inches by 36 inches, it's going to give me the world's smallest square because, well, that's what it truly is, right? That is a 24:36 piece of paper in comparison. So what we need to do to scale it, say I wanted it on an 11:17 piece of paper. Great. So I can pull up my calculator. And since I know I want it at, what did I say? 1/16 scale? I didn't even say a scale yet. Let's say 1/4 scale. So I have 11 inches on that paper, and I have 17 inches on that paper. So I can do 11 times 4, and that will give me the number that I can even have fit on 11 by 17. So at least by 11, I have 44 feet by 17 times 4, 44 by 68. So that's what I would actually need in feet. Rectangle, enter. I want to do 44 feet by, what was that? 68? Thank you. 68 feet, enter. That would be my 11 by 17 piece of paper to scale. Do you guys see what I did there? That is the sheet of paper. So that is absolutely 1/4 scale. Even though I didn't have to change the object, I didn't have to copy a whole nother object just to change its scale and get it printed. I can print it from just a rectangle, right? So how I would do it from there, and I could also confirm that my floor plan is gonna fit on 11 by 17. So that's always nice too. However, from here, let's say I was finished and I wanted to print it, right? If I was printing from Rhino, of course I could set my window and make it fit, right? However, if I'm printing from Illustrator, that bounding square is going to be the square that you want to line up to your art space, right? So if you were printing on 11 by 17, yeah. The only drawback maybe to this is that we do have to calculate for each piece of paper. So if I was doing a 24 by 36, I would do 24 times 4, right, which would give me 96. So 144 by, what was it, 98? 96. So 96 feet by 144 feet. Now there's 1/4 scale on a 24 by 36, right? So we can take that rectangle, gumball it real quick. I can get rid of my 11 by 17 paper, right? Oh, now I know that I can fit all my floor plans, all my elevations on that single piece of paper, right? Very often what I like to do, guys, is all my composition that I would want to do in my drawing, I do it here in Rhino first, right? The only reason I want Illustrator is so that I can manipulate the line weights, I can manipulate the fills and all sorts of things on a dime, right? The next thing I wanted to go over is maybe text box, even though I don't think it's too hard to go over. So like, you know, I can, for instance, type in text. I can type that text, so maybe the title of my project and maybe where it is. Of course, can apply that. Now it's going to come in pretty small. In fact, so small that I might have just lost it. There it is. Can type on this guy and bring it back into frame. Let's make it much bigger. There we go. So I can do a lot of these things here, you know, and I can get fancy with the spices. I could start to, you know, make a nice title block and things like that. Maybe I want it based on lines. I can offset those lines, maybe 1/4 inch, so 0.25. I don't know, make something kind of special about it. I don't know, it looks kind of neat. I don't know, get a circle in there. What I'm trying to say is, you know, give it that creative edge that I know every single one of you has. Alright, put a circle in there, why not? It's kind of a unique composition. Maybe I want a different title, or sorry, I can double click on it, which is really nice. Maybe I want a different font. So of course I can go to font. What's kind of nice is it usually changes right away. Didn't used to do that. Ooh, look at that, it's funky. Too funky. Can't even see it, so funky. So maybe explode it. See what happens when I explode. Now I can get the lines and I can laser cut them. Right, look at that. Anyway, the potential is honestly endless. But really the really important things is to of course stay as organized as possible. What's kind of nice about this process though, right, I can take all those stairs, and since I know that mine is fairly symmetrical, I can take certain points and I can flip them. Right? That way I can do a little bit less work. I don't have to do that all over again. Why work harder when you can work smarter? Mirror it again. So I'm taking the diagonals. Oh, got the exact same one. Wrong diagonal. And voila, I've got all my stairs. And it only took really not that long. Maybe I need a break in there. So I can do a polyline. So the next command to use. So I can draw essentially with this polyline. It's kind of nice. As long as you knew what you were doing, you could start to really not have to use all the tools. But yeah, kind of nice. Especially when it's, I do want it to be perfectly straight, so let's maybe draw a perfect line. Oh, look at that. I was so close. I don't know, maybe I want that error. It's not too bad. Let's keep it. But this is basically where I could do even the break lines. Right? You guys remember that command, break? Right, so that you can of course have little gaps. I could also trim something, say, maybe I didn't even need these steps, or I don't want them to show. I can always use a line perpendicular or intersection, that works. And can even trim my lines based off of a polyline, which is kind of nice. Of course it has to touch that polyline. And trimmed it. What's another command that may be useful? No, I think for the most part, it's really just different subject matter, right? Instead of drawing that three-dimensional object or calculating shade and shadow, we could start to get what it looks like. The next thing I did want to cover, though, just because it is so simple, that I did want to show it just in case. However, I do want to say, disclaimer, this next part I'm about to show you is not required. We only need two-dimensional drawings. However, if you want to start getting into 3D modeling, this is a great project to start, right? Because you got to start somewhere, right? Anyway, let's turn this stair into a three-dimensional stair real quick. Like I said, not required. So in my case, I don't want to accidentally get rid of this, so I'm going to make a copy. And just copy the whole thing and move it over. So I'm going to make this one three-dimensional. Double click on my space, double click on my perspective, and I can see just which one I have. I could even refocus on it just to make sure. Not too bad. So what I want to do first is actually maybe line it up with my Cartesian plane, and I'll show you why. So I'm going to go ahead and hide that previous one, that way it doesn't get out of the way, or I should say get in the way. And I'm going to move this one to my 0, 0 point, that way it can make things a little easier for myself. I'm going to move, type 0, 0, 0. Why would I do that? Well, I want to make sure it's in one spot. And it's so that when I click on these perspectives, I can line it up with my drawing a little bit easier, right? Anyway, maybe slow that one down to kind of understand what I'm going through. Anyway, let's refocus that. Awesome. So I want to make three-dimensional stairs, and I already have essentially some work, right? And let's face it, honestly, there's 10 different ways that I can make these stairs, but I'm going to go at least over 1 or 2 of them. So the first one that I can do is, well, I can remake my geometry as needed. So for instance, I need a polyline, and I want it to be a closed square. So I can actually trace my own drawing, right? Line it up with my points, and make sure that I click on the rectangle that I need. I can extrude that. Right, so extrude curve is maybe the first new command that we're going over today. And I could tell it a certain distance. Now I'm in wireframe mode, so I'm going to right click on my viewport. I'm going to go to shaded. That way you can at least see a lot better of what I'm doing. But obviously I'm moving it in the Z direction. How big is that stair tall? So I'm going to type in 6 inches, enter. This is another reason why you always want to do it to a true scale. Now, you'll notice that it's hollow, right? So a couple things I could have done. I can either cap it, C-A-P, enter, and it's going to turn it into a solid object. I'm going to edit undo real quick. I can also click on that rectangle, and when I extrude it, there's a couple of options. I can actually make it a solid from this operation. So 6 inches, enter, right? I could do the same process over and over. Next one, 12 inches. Next one, 18 inches. Next one, 24 inches, right? And so on to make my stairs. But that sounds pretty tedious, honestly, if you ask me. In our case, you'll be drawing your elevation, your section, and all your two-dimensional things. So if you draw all your pieces first and then go to this process, it's actually even easier, because what we're about to do next is basically draw that profile or the section cut of it. So for instance, I can go, really I'll do it in this plan, that way you guys can probably see it a little bit better, but I'll make a polyline. So let's go ahead and click polyline, and I'll essentially make the stairs in three-dimensional space or in one of my views. So in my case, I like to have all 4 open, that way I can see what's going on. So in my case, I'm going to type in 6 inches first, enter. Actually pretty small. I'm going to type in 12 inches, enter. I'm going to hold shift, that way I know it's perfect. Now, I could do all of them, or I could press enter and guess, right? I could just copy this. Why work harder when I can work smarter, right? Now, obviously, I think I drew it in the wrong direction, so let's rotate that real quick first. Gotta love Gumball. Right. And of course move it back into place, because that looks like it got off. Perfect. So maybe it's actually this right view that I needed. Yeah, there it is. So there's the, let's go ahead and make those a little bit bigger so we can see them. And let's go ahead and copy that. So copy, I do want to make sure that I select the right point, and I can even build it in three-dimensional space. Hopefully you guys can see that in the projector pretty well. Right? I could take all of them. Right, and this is something I would be drawing anyway for my elevation or my section. So I can join it, copy it again. Oh, like I said, you want to make sure that you're copying it from the right point. So copy, I want to select that base point that I started with, right there. Honestly, that's probably the hardest part about digital programs, is getting used to the interface. Like I said, it's like playing a piano. Nobody just jumps on the piano and is like, oh yeah, hit keys. How simple is that, right? Looks like we just got about all of our steps. Looks like we're missing one. That's okay. We'll take a line up so that we know where to trim. So that last step right there. And I'm basically just trying to work smarter. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And I'm just going to trim that off, right? Because I don't need it. Boom. However, I do want to complete, my drawing. I do know that I have 4 feet from that point, right? If this is my landing, or that's the last riser, if you will. Go ahead and join all these. That way I don't, misplace them. Join. Basically, just putting those lines together. Right. That way when I click on it again, I only have to click on it one time. And there it is, right? Completely together. Now, I'm going to use the extrusion process again, but I don't want like a perfectly paper stairs, right? I don't want them to be essentially one line thick. I want them to have thickness, right? I want them to, of course, be accurate and correct. So let's double click on our right, and let's draw them correctly. So I'm going to use a polyline again, definitely one of my favorite tools. From that top riser, I'm going to type in 4 feet, because it is 4 feet landings. Enter. I'm going to go down a little bit more than normal, just to kind of show off. And get that diagonal, right? However, I do want it to be parallel with the other, so maybe we enter right there. And let's go ahead and get that parallel line. Now, all I got to do is, of course, take these 2 points, and I will get the diagonal, right? So let's take that line. Sorry, mine disappears a little bit. And let's go ahead and move it. That way we know that it's perfectly parallel to the other one. So again, I can take all those lines and join them. If they don't join, however, right, maybe I get an error when did you guys ever have this? You're trying to join two lines and for some reason they won't join. Well, it usually means that they're not actually touching. They may look like they're touching. Have you guys ever seen those optical illusions where it's like, you know, the infinity triangle or whatever? But it's only because it's actually the overlapping of an illusion. This happens a lot in the digital realm where you're like, yeah, this looks really good. Then you move the camera a little bit and you're like, oh, wait, nothing's actually connected as I thought. So be careful of that. So for instance, this looks really good. I would double check that in my perspective view that it still looks good, right? And of course it does. It's still flat. That way, of course, I can extrude it. So let's go ahead and get to that. Sorry, I'm taking a little while. I do want to explain myself thoroughly, especially for a recording. So let's go ahead and complete the drawing. So there's my base point, and I'm just going to have it hit at that intersection and go ahead and trim it off, right? So I can take that little curve that I just made, trim, and trim that piece off. Of course, I want to connect it to the rest. So I got 3 pieces to connect. This little one, the stairs itself, and never mind, oh, okay, only 2. Join them. Awesome, looking good. All right, so now I have the elevation or the section of my stair, and I can go ahead and extrude it. Extrude curve. Wow, that was a lot easier. Okay. And I can go ahead and pick whatever point that I want. Maybe I actually want my point, you know, larger. No, I'm just kidding. Let's put it at the right spot. Wow, do I have to do that again? Well, not if I have Marcus's stairs, right? Or some others, right? So, you know, some of you guys, you know, kind of took my advice, made something simple. So you're more than welcome to, of course, take advantage of that. I can copy the entire thing again, put another one, let's say about right here, and rotate it. Of course, it works in a flat plane, so ta-da. And of course I can make another piece, right, and fill those in. So for instance, maybe I want that to sort of continue. Obviously I don't want this sort of papery connection. I mean, don't get me wrong, it looks cool, but very unrealistic, right? So let's go ahead and draw another polyline. And this is kind of my fake it till you make it. This is of course what I was doing in school. You know, make the pieces that you don't need. It's gonna be okay. Right, this is make sure it's a triangle. Yep, definitely looks like a triangle. You see what I'm doing there? I'm kind of making sure I didn't accidentally click a point off in space, right? So, extrude that again. I'm gonna make sure that it's solid. It is. I'm gonna go ahead and click on the other side. Ooh, I can even get fancy with the spices. Anyway. I do want it to lock on, so I'm basically looking for a point. That way I know it's perfect. Awesome. Now that looks all well and dandy. I mean, a little funky right there, but you know, not the end of the world. Let's put them together. So I need that piece, and that piece. I can't just join them. I mean, sometimes you can if they're all the same family. So in our case, you might be wondering what this is. So remember that tool I gave you? Type in what, enter. So we can find out some information about it. We know that it's an extrusion. This will actually tell you if it's opened or closed as well, because sometimes that'll stop commands from working. You'll be like, why isn't it working, Professor? Well, it turns out there's a small hole in this object, right? And of course, sometimes we need that information. So never be afraid to type in what on an object, especially when you're troubleshooting. But yeah, let's go ahead and put them together. Let's try join real quick, because it might work because they're all the same family. And no, it doesn't, right? Because as I thought, they're three-dimensional objects. However, things do change, so I try them out. In our case, what does work is called Boolean join, right? So I'm going to type in boo, as in I scared you. Right? I have no idea why it's actually called this. Some people pronounce it differently. I call it Boolean, just like, I don't know. I don't know. I probably have to look it up. But essentially these are the operations that subtract or add or splice things together, right? Or even split them apart based on three-dimensional geometry. So in my case, I want to put them together, so I'm going to Boolean union, right? Enter. And of course, it's going to turn it magically all into one object. What's really nice about that is now I can right-click. I can get a rendered version of what everything looks like. How simple was that? Right? Now you may be saying, well, Professor, I have a wall, right? Well, what is a wall, essentially? It's just an extruded frame, right? So I'm going to go back to, say, my top view. I'm going to go back to my plan, and I'm going to type in, oh, actually, you know, I'm thinking of Marvin's project. Maybe I have a very curvilinear wall. Maybe this curvilinear wall goes, shoot, straight through my stairs. Why not? And maybe I want that wall to have an exact 12-inch thickness. So offset 12 inches. Let's give it some thickness, and of course let's cap those off. There it is. There it is. Always wait for that O snap. Join. Let's go ahead and turn this guy into a wall, just like we learned from our profile. Oh, looks like we need to trim some things. Let's trim it up first. TRIM. Very small. Almost would miss it. All right, so join that. Keep losing my mouse. Awesome. So let's make sure those join. Awesome. They joined, and let's extrude them. Extrude curve. So I can even make a curvilinear wall going straight through the stairs if I want to. The next tool I did want to cover, just in case you do want to take this avenue. And the reason I say this, well, let's do this first. So the next one is called Wirecut. So this one's really nice. I can go to the view. No, not the television program. Right? And I could say, well, I want a circle. Enter. And I want to cut out a big circle piece, if you will. Do you guys remember, did you ever do like little clay stuff in elementary school? Right, you remember how they cut the clay? They got a wire and they wrapped it around the large chunk of clay and they sliced it. Right, they pulled that wire, if you will, until it basically sliced off the clay. Right. Essentially, this next command is called wire cut because essentially you take a wire or a curve and you could slice it through any three-dimensional object. So if I did want a circle going through this chaotic curvatured wall, I could. So, of course, the first thing that I would need to know is that the circle is outside of the object. So in my case, not good yet. Right, I need to make sure it's outside of the object. And let's go ahead and go to perspective. And let's wire cut it. Right, so I'm going to type in wire cut. I've already got my wire cut selected, so it says select objects to cut. I'm going to obviously choose my wall, enter, and I'm going to tell it how far to cut through this wall. Right, so I want it to cut all the way through, but I could, of course, change that. Now, automatically it goes, Chris, do you want to take out this portion, or do you want to leave it, or do you want to invert it, or keep all, right? In my case, by default, it deletes it, so enter, and voila. Now I've got this cool stair going through my wall. How many of you guys probably would have designed yours so much differently if you knew this program existed, right? However, I do make it look pretty easy on purpose. Don't get frustrated because it is an operational program. And very often look at the command bar because it's telling you what it wants to have, right? What input for the output. But last but not least, this is all fine and dandy, but you told me, Professor, that I could calculate shade and shadow. Well, that is the case. But in order to do that first, we need a spotlight. So I'm going to type in spotlight. I know, this program is just that intuitive. So the way Spotlight works is it's a cone, right? So I'm going to select my top view, And I do want to make sure that I essentially have my cone going all over my object, right? I wouldn't want a tiny cone. I wouldn't want a cone that's too big. So just make sure that I cover the object. Now on the second click, it asks for basically the angle, right? Do you guys kind of see that? Now obviously I don't want the sun going at a perfectly horizontal angle because that would be weird and it really wouldn't work that well. So in my case, I want to make sure that it's actually pointing down at the object. Do you guys see that? Another reason to have your views open at all times. The way I can double check this is I can right click on perspective and go into my rendered view. You guys see those shadows? Another reason why I didn't want you to basically calculate shade and shadow in 2-point perspective is because it's really hard, to be honest, and you won't use it. I'd rather you understand the principle and apply it to this, right? Because I think if you start here, to be honest, you're going to be in a good spot 3 years from now where you've mastered a lot of the computer stuff, right? But like I said, anybody can become a master at a computer. It's the design's eye. It's the mind's eye that is so important, especially at San Antonio College, right? If you've taken Freehand 1 or Freehand 2, we talk about the mind's eye a lot, right? Being able to see something in your mind and make it reality, unfortunately, is easier said than done. Even with AI tools, even like with all the stuff that they're trying to do with the brain and stuff, they still can't do it, right? Because it's, honestly, in one man's opinion, it's metaphysical. It's not even really here, right? Anyway, but now we have shade and shadow. So what's really nice about that is I can set up a camera, and this is where it's going to actually blow y'all's mind, and you're going to really hate me for this one. I know it's weird, but the command is called Make 2D. I know, it couldn't be any easier than that. Make 2D, enter. Basically, I can set up my hidden lines. I can set up to group the output. Let's take a look. Let's go back to wireframe so I can see it a little bit better. Let's go back to my top view. And would you look at that? It gave me the 2-dimensional view of my drawing. Now I can just put it in Illustrator, give it line weight. You guys see that? So if you take a look, it's actually 2-dimensional. It's on the ground. Right? And I didn't have to do a thing. Right? Just had to set up the view, set up the camera, make 2D, right? So like I said, however, that requires modeling your stairs. In some cases, all you guys have are, rectangular planes for your landing. Some of you guys have very regular stairs. Some of you guys have an entire diagrid system that may be starting to click now, right? Right? I can make one of those pieces, and I can really start to make this whole thing happen, right? I could build one side of those, Edith, and I can connect all 4 of them, right? So there's clearly a lot of things that we can do. I'll go over more modeling tools during the week. However, like I said, the whole point of these next 4 weeks, guys, is all 2D. Right? So even if we make this 3D model, I'm expecting this thing to be badass, not this. I don't even want to see the 3-dimensional model if that is what you choose to do. Right? Like I said, it's not a requirement. You can take it 2-dimensional, and for some of you, I would actually recommend don't worry about the 3D yet. That's going to actually go very quick, and I'm not going to be very helpful because it's not required for it. If you do want to learn more about it though, computer graphics is your jam, right? Because this is essentially what we do all day long, and I teach you all sorts of tips and tricks to make accurate objects. Then we turn them into reality. We go to the laser cutter and we make those exact objects. So I like to teach students, of course, how to make their mind's eye, those models that you see in your brain, right, 3-dimensionally, get it onto the paper, get it into the computer, is a huge task, right, that used to be so much harder than it is today, right? And it's absolutely liberating when you actually feel like you're in control, not the computer, right? Because How many of you guys feel the computer's still kind of in control right now? Right? You know, you're like, I still don't. It's telling me what to do when I should be telling it what to do, right? That is absolutely normal. Absolutely normal, especially for these kinds of complex programs, which is why we're trying to introduce them earlier, right? To say the very least. Any questions about this, guys? 2D or 3D? Have a better idea of what to be done? I think for the most part, you guys all know your floor plans. You can probably even draw it by memory. However, the last part of my tutorial, I want to show you how to scan something, right? Just in case that is the avenue that you want to take. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here because you won't be able to really see anything. And